The second trailer for Thor: Love and Thunder is finally here, as it gives us perhaps the closest look to date to this movie's principal antagonist, Gorr the God Butcher, set to be played by Christian Bale. In the trailer, we get to see an up-close look at Gorr the God Butcher, the villain who has since become known for his affinity for slaughtering gods by the dozens, and is now being groomed to face down the MCU's iteration of Thor, Odin's son. But while Gorr's showdown with Thor has been widely anticipated, who is this creature from the comics? Where does Gorr come from? And why does he hate the gods in the first place? And why does he wish to spend his life traversing the cosmos and hunting down gods? While Gorr's planet of origin has not yet been formally named, we know that Gorr's homeworld was largely composed of arid deserts that were nigh inhospitable. Canyons stretched across the planet's face, and earthquakes ravaged the landscape regularly. But despite this, life came to form and evolve, even in such a desolate environment. Though the planet reasonably should not have been able to sustain any living creatures, life finds a way. Gorr's people were forced to endure perhaps some of the harshest living conditions in the entire Marvel galaxy, and their mortality rate was extremely high. Gorr's parents died shortly after his birth, though with what little time they had, they instilled a trusting nature within their young son, and Gorr grew up into a devoutly religious tribe who prayed and attended their own religious ceremonies quite regularly. As he lived through his life, Gorr got married and fathered children, though the harsh conditions of his world claimed most of the children almost as soon as they were born, until he was left with just a single child. Later, his wife too would succumb to the nature of his homeworld, being killed by an earthquake and leaving just Gorr and his son left alone. Though even after this, his homeworld continued to beat him down even further. On the brink of death due to starvation, Gorr was forced to comfort his final son and his last living memory of his family through his final moments. While Gorr watched his final son slowly succumb to the agonizing death of starvation, he promised that somewhere in the galaxy rested a forest where they would never have to go hungry ever again, giving his child some sense of solace in his final minutes. With that, the last remaining member of Gorr's family died in his arms, leaving Gorr utterly alone with a lifetime of tragedy hanging over him. As Gorr grew up, he systematically watched as the environment stripped him of everyone he had ever come to love, claiming his parents, his wife, each of his children, and entire droves of his tribe. Yet despite all this, his people remained optimistic and prayed regularly to the gods, though Gorr ultimately failed to see the point in this. He then abandoned their religious practices entirely, not understanding how they could believe in the presence of individuals who had the power to help but continued to do nothing. After renouncing his religion and his faith in the gods, he was exiled from his devoutly faithful tribe, though Gorr still could not understand why his people continued to pray when the gods very clearly either didn't exist or, simply worse, didn't care. Alone and forsaken, he wandered his homeworld, hoping to one day die, but being forced to live in isolation before his graduation into the God Butcher. During his exile, however, he would come across a duel between two warring gods, one of whom was none other than the elder god Null himself. Null, the father of the symbiotes, was the first wielder of the infamous Necro Sword. Null battled an unnamed god clad in purple and gold, the god begging Gorr for help at the climax of their duel, and this was the moment that Gorr finally snapped. Not only had he just learned of the existence of gods and that they had been there all along, but one had the audacity to ask him for help and expected to be granted mercy. In this moment, he realized that this god, and gods just like him, truly could have helped his people at any point throughout their suffering. They could have saved not only Gorr's parents, his wife, and his children, but the lives of his tribe and the many loved ones that his peers lost throughout their long lives. Yet despite their power, despite the ability to do good for others, the gods refused to act. Instead, as far as Gorr knew, they simply ignored the plight of those who were suffering, and for all he knew, they might have actively been entertained by his pain. With this, Gorr finally twisted into the individual that we are set to see in Thor: Love and Thunder, a broken and angry individual who has just learned that his entire family didn't have to die, and didn't have to die in such a heinous and brutal fashion. After obtaining the All-Black, the Necro Sword, for himself, Gorr finally had the power to stand up to those who he believed had abandoned him and his tribe, and Gorr slaughtered Null's opponent as he begged for help. Thus began what would become an incredibly long killing spree that would carry him across time and space itself. With the All-Black by his side and fueled by vengeance, Gorr became utterly unstoppable for the next 3,000 years. He hunted down those who he blamed for the deaths of everyone he had ever known or cared about, which encompassed killing all all known gods in the galaxy. Over the centuries, Gorr amassed the resources and skills to contend with some of the most powerful gods that the timeline has had to offer in the Marvel Universe, coming extremely close to killing Thor on numerous occasions, and even succeeding at killing multiversal variants of the God of Thunder several times. He traversed the galaxy on his revenge quest, claiming the lives of dozens of gods from across various different cultures, both Earth-centric and otherwise. As he grew more in power with the All Black by his side, he learned how to heighten his powers with the legendary weapon, including using it to create his own armada of faceless minions, as well as manifesting some of the most powerful comic weapons to date. For a full breakdown of the All Black and the many abilities that it possesses, however, be sure to check out our video on why Gorr is more powerful than the gods, to learn the full origin of the Necro Sword and the connection that it has with the symbiotes. These minions, though, and aforementioned Black Berserkers, however, had been the bane of many gods, and while multiple gods have been able to fend off these nameless henchmen, it often leaves them in a tired and weakened state for Gorr to begin his massacre. Over the years, he has stood his ground against the All-Father Thor, the Greeks, and various other extraterrestrial gods, growing in power with every encounter with them. While we do not yet know for certain where Gorr is in his career as of the events of Love and Thunder, it stands to reason that given his long lifespan and illustrious career in the comics, that he is a veteran of his craft at the point where we meet him, and has potentially killed numerous gods. Seeing Gorr as a fully formed and experienced god hunter at this point in time would create a far more compelling and dangerous antagonist than seeing his origin story take place in real time. Although we will likely see flashbacks of this, but this still remains to be seen when Thor Love and Thunder hits theaters in just a few months. But anyway, watchers, what do you think of Gorr the God Butcher and his heartbreaking backstory? Do you think Gorr is justified in his quest to kill the gods, and much of his backstory do you think we'll see in Love and Thunder? Do you think Marvel will adapt or change aspect of Gorr's story? And if so, how do you think they'll adapt it in his on-screen iteration, played again by Christian Bale? As always, my friends, hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and I hope that you have a great day.